When it rains, it pours, and this week has exemplified wet weather after a dry start to the summer season. Boy, did it pour this week. When you think of climate change, you likely think about global warming or the temperatures themselves, but one of the less studied impacts is on rainfall. In this week's edition of Climate Friday newsletter, we'll talk about the link between a warming world and more rainfall, as well as heavier rainfall, a timely subject on all of our minds this week. Let's take those weather graphics full as we analyze this impact climate change and heavy rain, something that we have seen quite a bit of this week. So for starters, let's talk about just how much rain we have seen this week, and that largely depends on where exactly you live. Toledo Express Airport has picked up 2.3 inches of rainfall this July. After a dry start to the summer season, boy, did Mother Nature dose out the rain this week. Now, if you live in areas like Williams County, add way more than that, with 3 to 4 inches falling in far northwest Ohio. Crawford and Wyandotte counties to the south of Toledo also picked up several inches of rainfall. Looking at a map of a swath of soaking rain from Kalamazoo, Michigan, through Fort Wayne, Indiana, all the way into central Ohio and Columbus. That bright, vivid purple color, that shows you where the heaviest rain was unloaded. 6 to even 10 inches of rain fell to the west of Toledo. It was a close call, to say the least. Northwest Ohio got some needed rainfall, but if the jet stream had just been oh so slightly further north and east, this could have been us with that soaking rainfall that fell this week. So what does the climate science tell us about changes in rainfall and how is it becoming heavier? Well, since 1970, we've been collecting data at Toledo Express Airport as well as a number of other weather sites across the country, and scientists have noticed a 25% increase in rainfall intensity. Now, that word intensity is key because it reflects just how hard it rains. And as I mentioned at the beginning, when it rains, it pours. Rain is becoming heavier and soaking downpours more common. The 1970s, that is a time period when we really started to pick up on some of these climate change trends, and rainfall rates have skyrocketed since then. Now, there's a number of ways you can measure this, but in this particular graph, what you're looking at is the average hourly rainfall rate. In other words, if it rains for an hour, how much actually accumulates? Well, back in the 1970s, the number was 5, and we have skyrocketed to 6.5, and that's in measurements of hundredths of an inch. Just one metric that goes to show pouring rain is growing more common. So why exactly is this, and what is the relationship between global warming and heavy rainfall? Now, if you think about boiling water on the stove, something I'm sure you've all done, in fact, maybe a daily activity for some of you in the kitchen. If you turn the burner on low, it's going to boil, but it's going to take a while. If you turn the burner to medium, a little bit faster, and if you turn the burner to high, well, that's the most efficient way to boil water, of course, and it'll happen a lot quicker when that burner is set to high. The metaphorical burner here has been cranked to high, and 1 degree of warming equates to a 4% increase in moisture in the atmosphere. In other words, every degree that we climb, both in terms of land temperatures and sea surface temperatures, that equates to more evaporation and more water to be dumped out in the form of rain. It all boils down to the water cycle, and due to the global warming that we have observed, we've also seen more moisture and in turn more rainfall. To recap that relationship, warming, we have hotter temperatures both on the Earth's surface, oceans, and even our Great Lakes have been warmer than they were decades ago. That leads to evaporation. The water cycle causes more moisture, and that provides fuel for heavy soaking rainfall. And scientists have noticed heavier rain and more likely flash flooding. Even this week was a prime example of flash flooding that occurred west and southwest of Toledo in areas like Fort Wayne that saw 9 to even up to 10 inches of rainfall. Now, annually, Toledo has seen a 2% increase in rain since the 70s, and that's been most notable during the spring season, where we have a 7% rise in rainfall just in that season alone. Now, as a whole, summer is actually getting a bit drier than it was several decades ago. The biggest changes to rainfall have come in the winter and in the spring. Both of those green bars that you see on this bar graph indicate an uptick in rainfall. The winter season is about 4 to 5% wetter than it was back in the 70s. Spring is most notable with a 7% rise in rainfall. Summer and fall, both a little bit drier, but that difference has been less dramatic than in other areas. Now, speaking of that increase in rainfall, this is not just a Toledo issue, not just a Midwest issue, but much of the country has seen a rise in rainfall and more intense rainfall, especially across the Great Lakes region, the upper Midwest, and even the northern plains. Those green dots show you where rainfall is more intense than it was several decades ago. In the Gulf Coast and the southeast, there has been a decline in rainfall. In other words, the weather now is a bit drier than it was several decades ago, but across the Great Lakes, we have seen a significant increase. In fact, 40 to 50% more hourly rainfall intensity than we did back in the 70s. And this week was a prime example of that change that you might have noticed even during your own lifetime living here in the Midwest. Now, we have another rainy day on tap for Friday. In that WTOL 11 weather forecast, you'll see additional rain showers and even some soaking downpours. We've gotten about 2.3 inches of rain this July, and we'll see what that number climbs to after tomorrow. Whatever the weather, we'll keep you safe and informed. And in next week's Climate Friday newsletter, we'll assess relevant topics that may pertain to the weather, how it affects you financially, and changes that we are likely to see in the future. Thanks for tuning in.